You're listening to the Youth for Life podcast with Michelle Baum, Director of Why for Life at Lutherans for Life, where we prepare youth to be gospel-motivated voices for life. Be sure to stick around after today's live recording of our Chats for Life program to find out how you can be live too on our next Youth for Life podcast. For Life this evening, we have a special guest presenter here tonight, Dr. Eschelbach from Concordia Irvine, and he is going to talk to us about worldviews and how our worldviews shape our message, but also how we can speak to other people who have different worldviews. So I want to thank you for being here tonight and welcome you to Chats for Life. So we're glad to have you. I do want to open up with a quick question for those who are online and on screen, and just maybe a show of hands. How many of you have experienced cancel culture? Has anyone? Okay. When you think about sharing your worldview, when you think about talking about life, is there anything that makes it scary? What do you think? Is there anything that concerns you when you think about sharing the message of life?
I mean, you already mentioned cancel culture, and that's the big thing, really, is that cancel culture. Just basically people getting angry at you for you really just speaking your mind and telling them what you think about the specific subject of life.
Okay. Yep. Anything that concerns you when you think about talking about life issues with other people?
A lot of people are definitely against it. So, I mean, in some ways, people don't want to talk about it. They're worried about what people think about them.
Okay, so people don't want to, so they have different views, and then we get worried about what people think about us when we have different views. Yeah, okay, good. All right, well, I hope that you will get a lot out of tonight's discussion. So I hope you get a lot of information and a lot of encouragement and hope that you are not standing alone. And even better, you have the victor on your side, right? So we know who in the end who wins, and you stand on that side of victory. So let's go ahead and open up with prayer, and then I will pass it on to Pastor Eschelbach. If you'll please pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank and praise you for this night and for this time to gather together to talk about life issues, to talk about worldviews, to talk about the ways that the truths that you have given us, and to discuss how we might best share those truths with the world, to understand where others are coming from, and maybe to have some ideas about good approaches for how to start that discussion. We ask that you be with us tonight, that you be with our presenter, that you give him wisdom and much confidence in his presentation, that he is sharing important facts with us. And we ask that you be with those who are gathered watching and learning, that we might be able to use these bits of information, and that we also might be reminded of the hope that we have in you, the hope of not only life here, but life eternal, and remind us of that goal that all lives would be preserved and upheld so that they might spend eternity with you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, Pastor Eschelbach, thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, nice to spend an evening with you that are with us. Just by way of sharing experiences, I'm sure all of you are familiar that Jesus actually wasn't any better, more well-received than we are, probably worse. And what was, Jesus, what was the problem with Jesus? He was healing people and raising the dead and feeding the hungry and stilling storms. And, what's the problem? Of course, the problem was that Jesus was kind of crashing into their assumptions about life, and particularly about who's in control of our life and what the nature of that control is. And so it's never been any different, really. Martin Luther didn't have any different experience, really. I mean, the Pope tried to cancel Luther physically. He put a contract out on Martin Luther's life. That's not actually new either. So some things are worse, right, than having someone threaten your physical life as someone to threaten your social life. It seems like an even more powerful threat in our time. So we need to talk about if there's a way to reach people in the culture that we find ourselves in. So if you want to go to the next slide, Michelle. So that's just the announcement. That's a reminder. Yeah, so here we go. This is a good starting place just to sort of frame the conversation and to use that word. Just a sort of a thought prompt. Why are most important topics also the most explosive? That's been my experience. Of course, the nature of the content that I teach is precisely about all the most important topics. So I'm walking through a minefield every day, but there's good things that come from it. So just to give us a mental picture, an image, a way of thinking about what we're working on here. So number one, Simeon, would you mind reading the number one and the subpoints for us?
Can you have a conversation with a person while they are drowning? Why are you in the water? Why haven't you learned how to swim? Why don't you just float? Just do what I'm doing, go like this. Why do you treat the lifeguards who swim to save you so badly? Here, could you hold this baby for me?
Yes, so Simeon, how do you think the person that's drowning is going to respond to any of that?
They're just going to get angry at you for not helping them?
Yes, exactly, right. So does this help us understand the nature of the people in the world around us today? It's not surprising at all, actually. If we think about 200 years or so post-Darwin and all of the consequences of Darwinism over the past 200 years, it's not a surprise to me that people are intensely anxious about their life and well-being. They're so fearful. Statistics about young people, and the last statistics I heard, and this is a couple of years ago, 45% of our students are on some kind of medication for anxiety. That was not the case when I was in college at all, but I think it's a natural consequence. And so assumptions about the voice of religion in general and Christianity in particular is also misunderstood. So we start by sympathizing with people. You know, where did the ministry of Jesus begin? It began with his incarnation. And the New Testament, particularly Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, references all the time that Jesus understood our situation from inside the world that we live in. So if we start by thinking about the desperation of a drowning person, especially this is why I put the letter F suggestion in there. So you're going to say to a drowning, this is like saying to a person who has a low view of life, who's pro-abortion, but they're like the drowning person. I want you to advocate for life. I want you to change your mind about how you think about unborn children. And like, absolutely not. And you'll get more panic. So let's try number two. Ella, are you okay reading number two in the subpoints?
Yeah. If that won't work, what can we do? Teach children how to swim at the earliest age. Teach them about human development from conception to birth. Actually, just show them. Bring others to shore first. Get them stable and calm. Give them something warm to drink. Get them out of those damp clothes and into warm, dry clothes. Make sure they know that you know. Make sure they know that you know. Then share what they don't.
Does that make sense to you, Ella?
Yes.
And can you see the parallel between what's going on with letter B and what we do as ambassadors for Christ?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Now, friends, that is my approach, but it's getting harder. This is my 22nd year of teaching at university, at Concordia Universities, and I have seen the difference, especially in most recent years, and I have younger colleagues asking me if I've seen a difference. And just in the last 5 years, I've seen a dramatic difference. And so just this semester, we're only 4 weeks into this semester, and I have tried to do what letter B is suggesting. I have explained to my classroom of students the context, the situation that Christianity provides for us It's a life of safety, of grace, of love, of regeneration, of redemption, adoption, all the beautiful language of the gospel in the Bible. And so here we are. This is our context, and then move forward. And some of those students either can't or won't or both come with me. And so I have to keep backing up and speaking to those students. And we're going to see actually tomorrow whether I have to actually engage those students in a whole different way, distinct from the rest of the class. We'll see. But here's good. I think it's easy to remember the drowning person imagery and then what to do for a drowning person in the order that we go in. So next slide, please. What kind of world do you live in? Yes, next, okay, got to click away here a little, Michelle. So you go ahead and click through all the points, and friends, you can think about yourself. There we go. So how do you identify yourself? Do you tend to talk about, well, you just think about how you identify yourself, what you identify with, how you compare yourself with other people, and then if you've been able to do that, I'm not giving you much time to do it, but you get the idea. How did the results come out? When you think about your identity, do you tend to think of body or soul, time or eternity, material or spiritual? Do you think of currents of the world around you or counterculture? And of course, I say counterculture because in our time, the counterculture is the dominant culture. And so we've been pushed out. And so now we're the counterculture. So this also helps us think about how it's unlikely, maybe impossible, that one drowning person will be able to help another drowning person. So this is the thing about the fear factor for young people who want to have an open mind, who want to learn and explore ideas and pursue truth, but they're afraid to, or at least they're afraid for other people to know that's what they want to do because they'll be canceled. So it's also dangerous for a new swimmer or a weak swimmer to try to save someone who's drowning. We all know how that turns out. So you actually have to understand both other people and yourself, and then approach the subject, which is what we're doing. Next slide, please. So it became apparent to me 5 years ago or so in a class that got very excited very early in the semester, that they were hearing and seeing and thinking about the Bible I was showing them on the basis of an extremely counter-biblical worldview. And because of that, their judgments were all reversed from what their thinking should have been. So just to talk you through these, and I show this slide, I use this in class at the beginning of the semester, generally with good results, but some students can't move out of this worldview. So I have to reach back in and try and help them. So in the world, so this is called the red pyramid worldview. Our culture, our world, the world around us works in a pyramid way. In other words, you're trying to get ahead. Think about the language we use. You're trying to move up. You're trying to get ahead. You're trying to build a life. That's all the language of pyramid building. And you may have heard of pyramid schemes. So clever people try and manipulate other people to kind of work for them so that they go higher faster because other people are supporting them or providing the funds or finances or whatever in their life. It has a lot to do with being popular, right? Or being famous. So you think about athletes, actors, and business people, right? So all of this thinking, human thinking, has to do with a misunderstanding of where God is. And so where in God is the diagram, students always get this right. He's up at the top of the red pyramid, or maybe even above the top of the red pyramid. And so people assume that if we're made in the image of God, then that's the contest. See who can be most like God. That's number 2. What's the goal is to be most like God, to have the greatest possible life, which includes having the greatest assets or resources and the greatest power over other people. So the cancel culture is totally all about power. Number 3, reaching the goal, getting higher in the pyramid world, depends on your ability to compete with other people. That's what makes so many people anxious, nervous, stressed out, afraid, because they're trying to compete, but it's very difficult. You need lots of money to compete in our culture. You need lots of bravado, if you will, right? You need to have a big ego. You need to be highly motivated. You can think about Hillary Clinton, for example, is a great example of someone who's very adept at a red pyramid world until she lost the election, and then that's another story. In this worldview, what's particularly problematic is people think of themselves as only physical and only in time. So very much like the mind of a drowning person, everything I am is at risk here. It's very vulnerable, and my time is very short. This explains, again, the anxieties and stresses. This also explains the deep fear of dying, sickness, dying, and death. Look at our culture, right? We're at war with each other over what to do about COVID. And the nature of that is people's desperate fear about illness, about dying, about death, because then it's over. So that adds to the intensity of the competition, which brings us to number 5, issues about when a person is viable. So this brings us right into the abortion argument, which is to say, you're not a human being unless or until you're viable. So that even raises issues about what we do with people after they're born. It also raises issues about what we do with people when they're elderly or older. It also has to do with in the middle. What do we do with people who can't compete in the world? For some people, that makes them very compassionate. For other people, it makes them very intolerant. Like, no, we just don't have time or resources to take care of people that can't compete on their own. And so this is why people would say, well, if a human being can't support its own life, then it's not viable. And so therefore it's not a human being, and therefore the law doesn't apply. And then finally, number 6, can you make sense of any text or question or issue in this world in terms of the world's attitudes and agendas, and where the power is and where the money's going into the agenda of the world? Can you make sense of that on the basis of this worldview? And I'm going to say, yes, we can, absolutely. And I have seen a change in the faces of students in my classes when I talk like a person inside this worldview. So for example, if you're having trouble competing with the most advantaged people in the world, there is still a very powerful aspect of life that's available to you, and that has to do with human sexuality. So in our culture, you don't actually need money to pursue sexual experiences. And in our culture, if you're very fearful about the consequences of sexual experience like pregnancy, then homosexuality makes lots of sense. You're pursuing sexual experiences that are powerful, so super powerful experiences, but you found a way to do it often, you found a way to do it almost on demand, and you found a way to do it so that no one has expectations of you and there's no responsibilities outside of that sexual experience. Does that sound like what's going on in our culture? So also people so hypersensitive about it because they're afraid that Christianity or the government or other authorities or religious systems are going to take away from them the one experience, the one activity in their life that they have some control over and some access to. So before we go to the next slide, actually, we have time. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this worldview? And you can always reference back. It's easy to remember. It's a red pyramid world. The next slide, Michelle, please. Now, it doesn't matter. Never mind the PCSM, all that stuff that's on top. That's part of that's a longer conversation. But it's important also, just briefly, to show you that people, smart, gifted, intelligent people with power in recent history have found ways to increase the incline of the pyramid. In other words, people in the last 200 to 300 years have found ways to invent new worlds. And if you're the inventor of the new world, that makes you the ruler of that new world. And so going from bottom up in that list on the far right, it started with the Enlightenment, that human beings realized that we could kind of think outside the box, maybe, if you will, that we were smart enough to change the way our life works. And they went to work at figuring that out. And at any point in this list going from 1 up to 6, there are positive aspects of what's going on, but there's something actually more deadly, more sinister at work in these. So industrialism comes next. Think about what happened. People figured out that they could entice individuals to come work for them in a factory and mass produce things. And so these people became unbelievably wealthy in a very short period of time. And they did that by paying the workers less than the value of their labor and selling back to the public, to the population, what it is they mass produced for more than what the product was worth. But it was wildly popular. In the first place, it was popular because it got men out of the house. So it's much easier for men to deal with life in the factory than life in their home. So it was very attractive to them. Guess what the women generally figured out during World War II as they went to work in factories? Hey, I get it now. It's way easier to do this than to deal with children. Side point here, I've noticed in the last 5 to 10 years that more and more young people are opting for pets than for children, which you can understand, right? I'm sure any parents involved, Michelle will agree with me, that you have very little control over the lives of your children. You are, you don't know what you're going to have to deal with, but love is going to be required, and lots of it. Okay, so build on industrialism, then you come to Darwin, which opened the window. Darwin was a theist. He was a believer in God, but he set something in motion that made it possible for people who were opposed to God being in control to get rid of that notion. We don't need God anymore. So now atheism is gaining momentum. And notice the world is collapsing into just a material world in time. Then Freud comes along, not only Freud, but he also adds to the notion that God, people's notion of God is just their own experiences projected into the heavens, he said. And Freud was also very much a proponent of human experience by way of sexual experience. So you add the momentum now of human sexuality into the mix. And then following Edison and Bell and others, you have now media makes these things available. So advertising for things that are mass produced, advertising that is effective because it appeals to human sexuality or to the drowning person. Buy what we sell you and you will find something that will get you up out of the water, will relieve your sense of fear and drowning. And then you add to that the momentum of postmodernism. That's sort of a disappointment and discouragement over the idea that there doesn't seem to really be any purpose to humanity and we don't seem to be improving our way of life, right? So all of these invented worlds just add to the distance between those who have power and control and those who have a sense that they're drowning. And so this is where we find ourselves today. That's the red pyramid worldview. Let's see a different worldview. Next slide, please.
So before we go on, can I ask a quick question, if that's okay? So as Dr. Eschelbach is, talking about these new worlds that have been built, right? And I love that line where you said, that if you build a world, then you also, if you invent it, you also get to be the ruler of it, right? So guys, I want you to think about this. What sort of worlds have been built in the last 5 years, or in the last even 2 or 3 years? Can you see any movements or any worlds that maybe have been propagated, have been, we've got to now agree with this? What do you guys think?
I mean, there's been a lot more medically that's been public in the last 2 years than it has in the past. We focus a lot more on health, specifically because of this thing called COVID. And so that's just the people that were the first to speak on it and act like they knew what they were talking about are the ones that are now trusted, saying that if you disagree with them, then you don't deserve to have a voice.
Yeah. In fact, that's actually, changed our language, right? So when we end a conversation, I had a conversation with a teacher today, and I've noticed this when I end meetings with people, they often end with the words, stay safe, right? Rather than have a great day or I'll see you later. Stay safe, stay safe. So this idea that we need to work to preserve our own lives, right? That we need to work to maintain safety for us and for others has certainly become a worldview now, right? Can you think of any others?
I can think of one.
Yeah, go ahead.
How about the world of gaming, and even related to gaming, this Bitcoin or whatever, this electronic currency? My son-in-law just inherited all of the electronic equipment from a colleague of his who is 30 years old and retired multimillionaire. He made all of that real money by selling people electronic money. That's an invented world, and he owns it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and related to that also, I think most young people are probably familiar with all of the difficulty military people are having after doing a tour of duty, this post-traumatic distress syndrome. And I wondered if anybody thought about, so in my father's era, he was a disabled vet from World War II. And so all of his friends were in that war. In their life, death was real. The only experience they had with death was real. It was animals or people. And so they went into war from that experience, and they came home pretty much the same as they went. Nowadays, when people are very much desensitized to violence and death because they're gaming all the time, when they experience real violence and death, it's too much. It's impossible for them to cope with. So these things are related.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, especially with death. We do a lot to hide death, and of course there's a great fear of it. And you're right. I think we saw it more often, and 50, 100 years ago, it was seen more often, right? Infant mortality rate was higher, life expectancy was less. So
yeah, and people died at home.
Yeah, right. Instead of in hospitals or nursing homes. That's right.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, I will. If you guys have any other thoughts, be sure to jump in. But I'll turn it to the next slide.
Yeah, we'll go to we're almost to a happier place here. I wanted you to just see this. This was my original slide, and it's on all kinds of stuff on my website and on shirts I had made and my business cards. And I realized, I thought this was obviously the opposite of the other. So the other's called Red Pyramid. This one's called Green V. I thought that looks like a V, so we'll just call it a V, Green V. And then I was listening to people talk about my diagrams and my worldviews, and they were calling this Green Pyramid world. And I went, oh my gosh. So they still see this as a pyramid, which means when they think about this worldview, and when I asked them to think about the Bible and Christian theology according to this worldview, what they took away from that was, oh, it's okay to be a pyramid if you have God on your side. Oh my gosh. So next slide, please. I had to switch to a different shape, arc. So this is called Green Arc Worldview, and things are getting better. You also might not be surprised, but these layers in the arc, so from the bottom layer, this is where God is. God isn't aloof and insulated and distant from our lives. He bears everything that our lives depend on. And so you start with God the Father, and then the next arc going up would be God the Son, and then the next arc up would be male, what it means to be male, and the next arc up, what it means to be female. And even though we're working from lower to higher, even though we're talking about responsibility for and dependence upon the students, some students still got immediately angry just because of the terms father, son, male, and female. They just couldn't get past it. So I actually switched now to using Hebrew characters so that I know none of the students, it's so unlikely that I'm going to have a Hebrew student in my class. They won't assume, before I explain what's going on here, the nature of this diagram and this worldview. But is it common, and this is a difficulty for us, is that as you try and share good news with people or a good news worldview with people, they will judge that on the basis of their own worldview, or they'll assume things about your worldview that are a function of their worldview. So God is below, not above. Where does this person start and finish? Well, where that green semicircle is. In other words, the best human experience in the world such as it is since the failure of Adam is in infancy, right? You were never happier than when your mother was pregnant with you, and the next best is when you were an infant. And then that starts to get ruined as the corruption of Adam becomes mature in us and begins to assert itself against God and against parents and against other people. So in this model, there you do have a human nature, a physical nature, but it's corrupted, and it's going to try and move out of this world into the red pyramid world. But there is grace at work, and the forces of love are powerful to hold us together, to hold us in God's kingdom of grace. And so we actually, as regenerate souls, which is what Christians are, regenerate souls, we actually never leave this worldview. This is where the essence of our life exists. And this is what makes it possible for us to do things like love your neighbor as yourself, or more importantly, especially in our time, love your enemy. So the goal in this system, actually in this worldview, is to mature, which means naturally, as you develop as a human being, as you develop as an ambassador for Christ, as you discover how God has gifted you, you start to take on responsibility for other people, or other people begin to come to you seeking help, and naturally you are moved down as more and more people depend on you. As you get older, or if you're in the process of dying, even if you're younger, then you begin to move back up again, and other people take responsibility for you as you're not able to take responsibility for as many others. And both experiences are phenomenally wonderful. It's wonderful to take care of other people. It's wonderful to be taken care of. So just driving, for example, right? We all couldn't wait until we got our driver's license, and then we were in control. And I've had so many scary experiences with older people who insist on driving, and they really shouldn't be. I'm not going to tell you how old. I'm not that old, but I never want to drive. If somebody else is willing to drive, that's great, especially my kids. So the goal is to experience, not to move away from or out of or against, but to realize what life is all about right here where I already am. The goal, what does that goal depend on? Reaching the goal, it depends absolutely on God and all of the people God puts in our lives that provide for us, that support us, that mentor us, and so forth. In this model, when is a person viable? I know that you know immediately the answer, always. You're never not viable in this model. You're always supported and you always have a life eternal, which brings us to 6. So we're actually 3-dimensional. We are inherently, essentially, and I'm going to slow down a little bit and choose my words very carefully. The essence of a human being is a soul, not a body. The essence of a human being is a soul in the image of God, and all souls are the same. Souls are ageless, souls are timeless, souls are without sex or gender, souls are without skin color. They don't have ethnicity or nationality or race or any of the categories that people divide themselves by in our world. All souls are the same. Generated by God, redeemed by God, regenerated by God, permanent, eternal. There's all kinds of fabulous things that the Bible says about our soul. So we're 3-dimensional. In essence, we are a soul, but a body is essential to us. That's important. I'm using those 2 words carefully. Soul is essence, but body is essential because that's what allows us to have experiences in a material world where we learn what love is, where we learn what hatred is, where we learn what it means to be made in the image of God. It's like the science laboratory. Our time in this world is like time in a science lab where you learn from experiments, but the experiments don't kill you. The experiments don't undermine your life. They enhance your life as you leave the lab and then benefit from what you've learned. The other dimension of our nature, so by a soul with an extension, a physical extension of body, is the spirit. So our soul is a habitable place. You know this from reading the Bible. If the Holy Spirit's not inhabiting your soul, then the spirit of this world or the spirit of the prince of this world, the powers of darkness, will inhabit that space, or it will just be an empty space, which a lot of people complain about, right? They're lonely, they're depressed, because of the great emptiness in their life. And then, can we make sense of any text or question or issue in this world from this worldview? And the same thing about the Bible, absolutely. All of a sudden, all of the understanding and the answers to the best questions that people struggle with become more evident, and they're attainable and approachable. So this is the worldview that we try to help people become aware of. And this is like pulling the person out of the water. It's like getting them out of the wet clothes and into dry clothes. This is like the best of all warm drinks that not only feel good in your hand, but they feel good as they get into your system, and they do good for your whole system. And so one more slide, I think. Whoops, no more slides. Back up one then.
Can I ask a question about the soul?
Yes, please.
My understanding is that your soul is your mind, your will, and your emotions. One, is that your understanding? And 2, are you saying that a soul isn't unique?
Great question. Thank you, because clarity is important. The definition that you gave is common definition among those people that study psychology and human physiology. But biblically speaking, the soul is something more than just a mind and a will. It's something that's made in the image of the Son of God before he took on human flesh, before the incarnation. So a soul is transcendent. A soul experiences things through will and mind and emotions and experiences, all of those things, but it's more than just those things or even the sum of those things. And every soul is unique, but not different from one another in any of those kinds of categories that we fight over in our culture, right? So no soul is better than another soul. No soul is more valuable. We don't have these categories of contentiousness that we're so used to in human history. We are a single human family made in the image of God and equal on that kind of a substantive basis, right? Individual, yes. Unique, yes. equal or the same, also yes. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, yeah, thanks for asking. Time's against us always, and I'm unpacking some theological notions here in a relatively short amount of time. So it's sort of like, I call it chia theology, right? You know what a chia pet is, or like a sponge. I'm giving you a sponge, and as time allows and as you add water, it just expands. So it's a dense model, but it's a platform, right, for us to answer questions, for entertain issues or challenges, and see if in fact these worldviews help us sort them out. So I thought I had one more slide, but the last thing I was wanting to say with you then is, when it comes to promoting the value of human life, no time could be better than now. And the beauty of teaching people about the facts about human development from conception through term and delivery, birth and infancy, is when they're little. Young people aren't drowning yet. It's beautiful. They still live on the green arcs of their family and those who care for them. They still know that their life depends on other people, and are very comfortable and happy and about that. So the more people we can teach about human development early, the less work we'll have to do later on. And it's fun work, right? Little kids love to, you can just almost click through the slides that show the development of a human being, and they're like, yeah, that's so cool. And, they're just excited to learn about it. So that's pretty much grades K through fourth grade, but starting at 5 and 6 now, they're starting to get edgy. So you do have to be ready for tackling some hard questions or challenges they might put to you, but of course in a very green arc, happy, excited, positive sort of a way. My daughter Abby works, she's kind of like Michelle in her work. She has another set of slides and another set of prompts and notes and education about interacting with 7th grade through high school and then college and adult. And that's very much a function of establishing rapport with people first, right? If we're going to help someone out of the water who's drowning, if we're going to help someone out of a red pyramid worldview, like I'm doing this semester especially, then we have to establish rapport first. They have to know with deep certainty that we care about them deeply, that it's our life for their life. So the sense of threat or danger or risk or judgmentalism or all those sorts of things are resolved. We have a deep rapport, a deep connection as people who care about them. And then we can begin to share with them how we came about this disposition that gives us space and time and inspiration and a will to meet people where they are, and then to help them to a better place. I think that's what I have by way of me talking. Michelle, I'm happy to field questions or listen to what other people think.
Yeah, so are there any questions that you guys have that you want to pose right now? I do want to jump on, what Pastor just said as far as establishing rapport. So with Y for Life, what we talk about is building relationships, right? That it's really hard to change a life if that person or to serve a person, the person doesn't realize that you care for them, that you love them and that you want to help them. And so, it's very easy to stand in a corner and hold a sign or to say, don't do that, but do this. But that doesn't work. and it's not the whole point. Like the whole point of upholding life really is to uphold individual lives, right? To be part of their lives and to enter in as God calls us to be lights in the world, right? When we walk around, we carry the light of Christ in us, and we are that bright beacon of light in our interactions with others. And so, and part of being the light is that warmth, right? That comes from the message. So, yeah.
If-
Go ahead.
if I can build on what you said, and that's so helpful that you said that, because you reminded me of some things, and especially for young people to understand that all of the particular experiences that you're having, especially the struggles and the difficulties, flow into what 2 Corinthians 1 says about God comforts us in all our trials or difficulties so that we're able to comfort those in any tribulation with the comfort that we know that we've experienced from God. I teach graduate studies at Concordia, which includes pastoral studies, and I had a student a couple of years ago who identified as homosexual. He was part of that community. He was swept up in it. He was as volatile and edgy as anyone might be. And then someone befriended him, and he found his way out of that. But he's so devoted to that culture, and he's so effective at that culture. Similarly, another, probably my best friend, who's also a pastor, he's retired now, but he was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, and he was showing off. One day he was so good at helicopter piloting that he did stunt shows, and one day his stunt show killed a man, one of his own men. And that's something that he lived with, and it's something that Christianity provided him relief for. But who would have known, and that's probably 10, 12 years ago now, but a man came into his church off the street with lots of attitude, and he said, I just want to come in and tell you that I'm sure you can't help me because I murdered a man. And my friend said, yeah, me too. Oh my gosh, what a game changer, so we want to appreciate if God actually does make things work together for good, all things. And so the very things that we might be the most ashamed of or embarrassed about, or maybe even the most traumatic for us in our pasts, do provide us with insights, places where we can begin rapport with other people and build some really powerful ties on the basis of common experience, and then help them along.
And of course, that basic common experience is our own sinful nature, right? I mean, we struggle with sin too. There's not a single commandment that we have not broken. And so that too is a relational, an unfortunate relational reality, but it is, right?
Right.
To be able to say, I'm sorry for you, and I'm sad, and let me walk with you because I've struggled too. So yeah. So what,
Michelle,
yeah, go ahead.
I think I heard you say that it's easy to hold a sign and that doesn't work.
Yeah, so go ahead.
I don't think it's easy to hold a sign. I've been there outside the abortion clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think it does change minds, and wanted to know your comments.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess, when you're standing with a crowd of people that are affirming you and you're doing that with them, it's certainly not a bad thing to hold a sign. And we went to the March for Life a couple of weeks ago, and we held signs too, right? But you get to walk away from that. And you maybe do change lives, and I hope that you do, but I think life ministry happens with the hands and with the heart and with the voice. And maybe it starts there, maybe it starts there and you have the opportunity to have an incredible conversation with a person and uphold that child's life. But, wouldn't it be wonderful also if you had the opportunity to follow that family and to support them, not only through the pregnancy, but also after, once the baby is born. And so it's true, we do need those voices everywhere. And I guess I would encourage, especially, youth of today, to recognize that life ministry is long-term. The way that we uphold the lives of our children, the way that we uphold the lives of our parents, in the vocations God has placed us in, we have the opportunity to serve. And certainly, one of those vocations can be serving in pro-life arenas in different ways. And God can work through that. But I think when you look at life ministry as a whole, it is usually a long-term commitment. And that's what I encourage, our youth to recognize. So we're not just there for the moment, but we're there for longer. So does that,
Right. Well, yeah, I think that they will probably find as they go through life that the people holding the signs are also the people volunteering at the Crisis Pregnancy Center. That's been
Yeah,
my experience.
sure.
I've volunteered at the Crisis Pregnancy Center for probably 5 years before I ever picked up a sign. So,
Sure,
and for
yeah.
young people, it might be the opposite. It might be that, oh, this was a real movement and I started with holding a sign and now I'm I'm volunteering. And so,
Yeah. There are so many ways to get involved in the life movement. And again, some of those ways are in your own home and in your own community where God has called us through our vocations.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for the work you're doing. So, hi, Matthew.
Mr. Eschelbach,
Yeah.
There you go.
is there a reason that in your green arc diagram, you split out the authority of the Father and the authority of the Son, God the Father and God the Son?
Yes. Just because there is a relationship between the persons of the Trinity, and Jesus references that often. So especially in the Gospel of John, Jesus will talk about how he has no words of his own, but he communicates the Father's words. No mind of his own, he communicates the Father's mind. No will of his own, he does the will of his Father. And Jesus also it makes evident to us that what makes it possible for him to be the creator, even while he knows that that's going to require him to be the redeemer, and why he absolutely knows what that's going to mean for him, that we witness every year on Good Friday. He can do all those things, and he does, because his life rests in the absolute care of God the Father. That is the model that is built upon then when the Bible speaks to what it means to be male, that it means to be an extension of the image of Christ in the lives of other people. So what it means to be male is to bear responsibility for and provide for the lives of other people, precisely because God the Father and now God the Son provides for mine. And then that's extended through what it means to be female, all the way to what it means to be a child or children. So that's why I broke them out, just so we can see these layers of relationship, right?
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for today's life topic. Check out whyforlife.org or email Michelle at whyforlife.org to find out how and when you can go live with us at our next Chats for Life session. Or join us next time, right here at Why for Life Podcasts, where youth learn how to be gospel-motivated voices for life.